Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're back for part 2 of our discussion with the defense with Jonas Schaefer. Jonas, how you doing?
Good, Ken. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I have to ask again. It's part of the rules of being a normal host. Sorry, it's just been a minute or so since we stopped talking for this first episode. But I do want you to go back and download that first one. Jonas, exceptionally cerebral guest, has a lot of interesting things to say about the Ravens defense as it's constituted. Studies a lot of different defensive packaging and scheme elements, and has brought a lot to the table in the first episode. So a lot of fun always to talk defense with him. You always want to have someone on who really wants to kind of mix it up and talk about things. And a lot of interesting things to say about the pass rush in particular, and some ruminations about that Miami game from 2021 and how awful that was. That kind of is hopefully what the Ravens are making facing their pass rush and their secondary look like these days, in a completely different way, of course. But we always do individual player discussion in the second half. Start with that. Jonas, you're up first.
I guess let's talk about Arthur Maulet, just because I think he had a pretty good game, an exceptional first half in general. That's probably the most noted person that I have here. Just a good job, despite the rather formidable task that he was up to, with seeing a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then just the general challenge of going against these Detroit schemes. Let's just kind of, so some of the plays that I have. The third drive, you have the sack. I know we talked about in the first episode. It is interesting to see the shoe on the other foot in a lot of ways, because I know the frustration with the Greg Roman offense was how not only do you have the clock issues, but just the condensed looks made some of those exotic blitz packages easier to get home. And that's been less of a problem this year because the Ravens are getting to the line of scrimmage quicker and they are spreading things out more. So the blitz packages that Lamar has seen have been more conventional and I think easier to handle for this offensive line. But because of how Detroit likes to organize itself offensively, great job by Mike McDonald. I don't know if it was a blitz that they kind of checked into because it was a condensed look, but all Arthur Maulet had to do was just come in off the side completely unblitzed, because Travis Jones and Broderick Washington, like we talked about in that first episode, did what they had to. They engaged the middle of that offensive line, kept it occupied for as long as they had to before they dropped into coverage, all 300 plus pounds of them. And, Arthur Maulet does what he does and takes advantage of a relatively weak prey because Jared Goff is not CJ Stroud. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not even Gardner Minshew. He is a very immobile quarterback. And the Ravens, as Maulet showed, I think did a good job of actually finishing some of those sacks. And it was just a great job by him to finish the sack on that. Next drive, what do you have?
Finish the drive with a play.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, I think on the 2nd and 12, I believe 2 plays earlier, he basically forces a throwaway from Goff because it is a 2nd and 12 throw. It's an in-breaker. Amon-Ra St. Brown is matched up on the left side with Brandon Stevens. Stevens is his primary cover guy. The Ravens drop into, I think, some too high look, and Maulet just jumps the route so quickly and so smartly that it was frankly a little bit surprising that Goff threw his way or looked his way and wound up, because by the time that Goff had the ball reared back, Maulet was basically in that throwing window, and all Goff could do, his lone recourse, was to just throw that ball like 3 yards to the left of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brandon Stevens, or else that would have been probably a pick six. And then as you said, Ken, I think 2 plays later, it was kind of funny to on that 4th and 8 incompletion. It was kind of weird to look back at that play, because it's I don't know if Maulet is playing trail technique or what, but at the break in that route, Marlette almost kind of comes to a stop as Amon-Ra St. Brown starts to head to the sideline. I don't know if Amon-Ra St. Brown was almost playing like a game of chicken with him, where he wanted Marlette to make him think that he was breaking left over the more open middle part of the field, when actually he was going to head to the corner. But Marlette basically just runs that route for him. I don't know if you call it like a sell route. I don't know if you call it a corner route, but he was basically in Amon-Ra St. Brown's shorts for every step of that route, and there was really no place that Jared Goff could put it. So great job by him. I think he was one of the stars of that first half. I don't have a whole lot of notes on him for the second half. Obviously, he was targeted throughout because of just how often Amon-Ra St. Brown was targeted, but I think he did a really good job at doing what he had to give the Ravens the advantage that they needed in that first half.
Yeah, late in the ball game, Q4, 5:13. I have it. It might be. Yeah, he was had ideal underneath coverage again. It was actually, I think, with 4:59 on fourth down and 10, he had ideal underneath coverage again and forced an underthrow. One thing we saw from Jared Goff a lot, Jared Goff is not shy about playing this game as if it's the Pro Bowl. He grounds the ball as if there's no intentional grounding rule. He'll throw the ball away at the feet of receivers, at will. And frankly, I think that's exactly what they want to see from him. He's not a guy who is going to be particularly good about avoiding the sack. The one time he tried to avoid the sack in this game, he got pushed out of bounds for a 2-yard loss and would have been better off throwing the ball away, obviously, from Van Noy. So he's not a guy you want on the run. He's a guy you want to protect as well as you can. They are certainly built to do that, and they have to use deception to get him time and space occasionally otherwise. The one thing I'm always kind of jealous about that Goff can do and Lamar can't, and Lamar can do it occasionally, but it rarely works, is that the edge defender almost never buys the zone blocking aspect of a zone block left, naked boot right play. And so they're the edge defender on the what would be Lamar's right side is almost always keyed in on Lamar in a way they never let him get away. And with Goff, they're buying the run the whole way. And so he can roll out like Flacco did for many years and have a good chance to get an ample time and space opportunity, which means he can test the deeper routes that are open to him on that boot. And that's something that Goff was able to do one time anyway in this game, but I thought they did a pretty good job of containing that in general. And the Lions actually, I thought they did less in this game did more of chasing the ball to the wrong, the non-carrier of the ball after the mesh point in particular.
Yeah, it was that they did a great job in general. Sorry, I was just looking at something else, but I think one thing that we should talk about if and when we talk about Kyle Hamilton is some of the few concerns that I have just with this Ravens defense when it comes to some of like the play action and motion stuff that can get this defense a little bit over aggressive and over its skis and lead to some of the few big plays that I think we've seen against this Ravens defense.
Well, maybe we jump into that right now. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about Hamilton in this game, who's a little bit of a hidden player. When he's on the back end and he's part of the cover two shell that is going to deny a lot of deep passing opportunities. I mean, it's not exactly like Goff is wearing a wristband that says "find 20" on every play, because that's really a lot of respect given to a single high safety. It's really more of a case of, the Ravens are gonna have a good chance to be playing a deep zone look where not only do they have two guys back, but they're also going to be looking at you. So they're going to have good clues as to where the football is going. So if you throw it deep, you better have some way of scheming that guy open or working off a concept that allows you to detect what the safety's doing or trying to get him to commit to an underneath route. And most quarterbacks now have, I think, come to the correct conclusion that they're not going to be able to do that very often. And that's at the heart of why the Ravens are allowing so few deep shots and so few success on deep shots this year. But I think Hamilton is kind of wasted in that deep role when he's back there, just preventing the long pass, because I think it's been proven that other players can do it well. Williams with one arm could do it kind of well. Worley did it exceptionally well in the game he was back there, right. And it was game and a quarter or whatever it was. And I think they've got another guy. They've got another free safety, Adams, who they signed to the practice squad, who I thought would be the call up this week. Maybe hasn't completely figured out the defense yet, or hasn't completely adapted to it. But he's an older safety, but a free safety. I think the opportunity is right to move Hamilton back to slot corner, and I think also Mollett is good, but he's limited in some ways that Hamilton is not, and so I think he probably gives you more in general. I think Mollett has much more trouble with trail technique against any pretty good receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if there is a slot defender in the league who I would trust more against a screen heavy team than Kyle Hamilton. Mm-hmm. He can bench press any blocker he's up against. He just flies around with reckless abandon. I mean, I think the Ravens, I remember looking at this stuff on Sports Info Solutions. I think they were just god awful over the first 6 or 7 weeks of last season, basically before they finally settled on Hamilton as that primary slot guy at stopping screen passes. Mm-hmm. They were just, I think that Buffalo game, the Bills got him a couple times.
I just want to say that's also exactly the point at which they got Roquan Smith and they got Tyus Bowser back, yes. Which is also right. Fantastic tonic for that exact problem.
Right. I think the Bengals got them, even though the Ravens won that primetime game in Baltimore. I think the Bengals got them a couple times with some screen passes. Mm-hmm. And then Hamilton comes in, and because he's always going to play to the passing strength of the field, why would you even bother throwing a screen his way? Because either he's the guy whose man is getting that pass, or he's the guy who's taking a block from another receiver and just completely destroying their leverage.
Mm-hmm. He is certainly a very special player in that regard, and you take some of the limitations and deal with them.
Yeah, but to your point though about just kind of finding ways to move him around, even though he is typically lined up in that too high structure. I thought it was interesting. He's not involved in the play, but this is the first drive, and I thought it was interesting just to look back. There's the incompletion to Jameson Williams. Was covered by Brandon Stevens. I think it's a cover 3, and it's a tough throw because Brandon Stevens is outside leverage. It's an outbreaker, yada yada. But it was just Mike McDonald is a madman type of reaction when you see Kyle Hamilton lining up as the one of the 2 high deep safeties, and then just screaming downhill into the flat to basically take care of the running back or the tight end who's leaking out, and you have the cornerback on that side of the field being the one who's dropping into that deep third. So they are not necessarily being passive with how they use him in that deep safety spot. They are having ways that they're trying to find ways for him to be more dynamic, more closer to the action. And I thought that was an interesting way, even though he obviously had no impact on that play.
Mm-hmm. He's got the characteristics you want to be a vacuum cleaner for the football in a lot of different ways. Obviously, the ball gets tipped in the middle of the field. It's usually good news for the defense. But the Ravens have a particularly bad record this year of converting their passes defense to interceptions. They're near the top of the league in passes defense. I think they might be 4th, but they're in a 6-way tie for 8th with 5 or 6 interceptions. And the only guy who's really had any success is Geno Stone, who's 4 for 4 in terms of his PDs. Yeah. Everybody else on the team is 2 for 37 or something in terms of their converting their PDs. So they've had a lot of problems with that. They should be getting more. You get some passes defense to the line of scrimmage. You expect to get some. You get some passes deflected by the inside linebackers. You expect to convert some of those, particularly if you're in cover 2. So anyway, I wish Hamilton could get more involved. And I think the closer to the line of scrimmage you get him, the better for those purposes. I also think there's other players who play a great center field that the Ravens have had on the team this year, and Williams and Worley have both been terrific. So anyway, I've kind of been around in terms of where Hamilton can help the Ravens most, but I'm back to it being at nickel. I really want to see him there if they can arrange for it to happen the rest of the year.
Yeah, and the to kind of bring it full circle to the one shortcoming that I think he's had this year is like when he is asked to be that last line of defense or like the last line of defense, when he messes up and it gets over aggressive, I think they've really been hurt a couple of times. It hasn't been very often, but and this was like a minor example, but I thought it was just indicative of my broader point, which is there's like on the fourth drive for the Lions, it's only a 14-yard completion to St. Brown, but it's a play action bootleg. Hamilton gets a little bit over aggressive on following the run flow of that. And he misses Amon-Ra St. Brown coming back on the crosser. And, he tries to play that, I guess I think college coaches call it kind of robot technique, where you just are following you don't really have eyes on the quarterback. You just are trying to put yourself perpendicular or parallel to the receiver who's coming over the middle of the field. And he couldn't do that. And it reminded me of him being out of position on the Derrick Henry run, against the Titans. He followed that run incorrectly. I think he was probably one of a couple guys who didn't do their job. And it was either him or it was another safety who were out of position on the couple nice Zach Moss runs by the Colts in that loss in a couple weeks back. So he is a fantastic player, but his rare moments of indecision or over aggressiveness, I think, have been notable this year, partly because he's been playing at a deeper spot in that defense.
Okay, so I think you've answered the question, but you think he would be the defense would have lower severity errors if he was up front, occasionally being over aggressive, than if he's on the back end?
I don't know. I think it's just like we are focusing on the on the what am I looking for? Like the poor brushstrokes on the Mona Lisa.
Yes,
we're fixating on those things because they are. I just think that when he messes up, it's notable because it's just like it's like an offensive lineman where you really are only focusing on them when they screw up, because the Ravens are so rarely tested downfield. Kyle Hamilton is so rarely tested. I mean, we should acknowledge that he had terrific coverage on that earlier pass to Sam Laporta on that third down, and he just again kind of ran the route for him. Was playing like 12 yards off coverage, but still was able to basically know the exact step at which Sam Laporta would break out to the sideline and was there to be really in contested catch territory. So I think Camel Hamilton is a genius level football player, and I'm sure he'll get smarter. And these errors that we're talking about will become fewer and further between. But I do think it is interesting that the underlying cause for some of those rare missteps have been like pre-snap motion or players being, not where you typically expect them to be.
All right. Well, let's move on to another player.
Who you got? Do you want me to go?
I kind of went with Hamilton. It's up to you, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I guess I'll go with Marlon Humphrey. He, according to Next Gen Stats, was targeted just 4 times, allowed 2 completions for 5 yards. He obviously had the pass interference or the defensive holding penalty or whatever it was, which to me during the game and again looking at it now seemed pretty soft. I think it's been after a rough reintroduction to the NFL with that Pittsburgh game has been pretty dang good these past 2 weeks. He didn't allow a single completion in that Titans game, and for him to go from no completions allowed to 2 completions allowed for 5 yards was, I think it's a step in the right direction. You worry about these guys coming back from foot injuries, how they're going to respond. Devin Duvernay, for one, I think we can point to as like a guy who hasn't gotten back that burst that he had before that foot injury last year. I think the Ravens did the right thing ultimately by, being patient with Marlon and making sure that he was totally comfortable and getting up to full speed. I don't know if he's there completely yet, but he looks pretty good. It was interesting to go back and watch the All-22 and see him show that physicality. I mean, they're the Marvin Jones replacement that the Lions threw out there. What was his name? I think Antoine Green.
Yeah,
he was
end,
just he. So is he a tight end? Because I think
he's listed as a tight end on the Detroit roster, I believe. So
okay.
We looked at, no, I'm wrong. He's a wide receiver, 6'2", 199.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
He was just like a baby deer out there. He was at the slightest bit of contact, whether it was from Marlon jamming him or Brandon Stevens jamming him, just could not absorb the slightest bit of contact. And the Ravens obviously like to play that press coverage. They like to get up in your face and make you earn those smooth releases. But if they are bullying a guy like that, I think it's a good sign for the rest of the year when they face some of these real thoroughbreds who are on this Raven schedule.
I think there's a lot to pull from Marlon's performance that has really, really positive portent for the future here. I think that the portent for the future, that's redundant, right? Anyway, positive portent is
I don't think you do a positive portent for the past.
Yes, no, I mean, that'd be good. So you have, I loved his physicality versus the run, and I think that's been good since he's returned. I think he's been a good downhill player, always done that very well. Always been a guy who could play off his receiver to another receiver, which we haven't really seen yet. We saw him blitz the quarterback twice, got pressure on both occasions as I scored it. The first time he actually just got Goff's sleeve, but that was enough to get Goff turned around and wondering what happened to him, which was, that's distracting is exactly what you want. And then in coverage, he obviously had his best game by far since he returned. And the last thing I'll say here is that it's a really good sign and kind of an embarrassment of riches for the Ravens now that they don't have a place for Rock Ya-Sin or Darby, and I'm not even sure which one is the third cornerback at this point. And Stevens is taking every snap, and Humphrey's taking every snap before the retirement, of course, when they got all their number twos onto the field, including JAD and Ya-Sin and Darby. But Ya-Sin and Darby were extremely serviceable in these first few weeks of the season and got the Ravens through. Stevens has been an Iron Man who's probably played more snaps than any other Ravens player on defense right now. It's very close. He had played all of the snaps before this game, and he missed some snaps, but Queen and Roquan missed some snaps also. So I think it kind of evened out. He's still got the lead.
He is, according to Pro Football Reference, at 478, which is 7 more than number 2, Patrick Queen.
There you go. All right. So anyway, they've certainly, I think, seen the progression out of Humphrey that I think will take him to the right place. At least I hope so before it's over.
Do you think we will see, Ken? I guess just kind of, if you were to look into your crystal ball, do you think we'll see at a certain point in the maybe relatively near future, the Ravens go with, I don't want to say experiment because that makes it sound like it's not serious, but do you think they will at some point transition to Stevens at one outside cornerback position, Ya-Sin/Darby at another, and then Marlon back in the slot?
I think they've got better options now. If I'm looking at the general elements of physicality, size, you mentioned the ability to bench press an opponent. I'd go Hamilton there first. And one thing, here's the wild card in here, and I've thrown this out there. I don't know if this is a realistic possibility or not, but I think he'd be great at it. What if you put Marlon on the back end? The guys, we haven't really seen what Marlon can do looking at the quarterback, but I think he'd be great at it. He'd certainly be physical enough to play safety. That wouldn't be a problem like it is for many quarterbacks who try and transition. Like the whole notion that Marcus Peters was going to transition to safety is kind of like not realistic based on his build and physicality. Honestly, he's a dog. He really tries to tackle. He's just not built to take a lot of punishment as a safety. Humphrey, I think, is. Not only that, he'd be a great ball puncher. And I think if you get him looking at the quarterback, not only do I think that he'd be good at that, but I think if you wanted to put him back at corner, you could. And there might even be portable skills he'd take with him back to that position that he'd learn at safety at a higher level.
Yeah, when I think a prerequisite for being a safety is a willingness to tackle people. And Marcus Peters, God bless him, I don't think was all that interested in doing that. If you just remember that god awful near end of game play against the Saints, where he just decided a half-hearted shove on, I forget, was that a catch and run, or was that a
trying to remember the play here in the 2022 game? It would have been.
Yes, it was just very. I mean, like, it didn't matter because the Ravens were running away with the game at that point. But it was just like, what are you doing, Marcus? I mean, you are such a talented ball hawk, but at that point in his career, and maybe it's still now, just a very, very low level of interest in tackling. Contrasted nicely, of course, with Marlon. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, Ken, because I was just thinking, like, what if Marlon, has lost a step or did lose a step? And I think you're right that they could very easily in the future, move him to safety if that's what they saw as best for the team. And that was something that he agreed with for whatever reason. I mean, like the goal under Wink Martindale, I don't think it's been restated as pop culture infused terms, or even like just kind of universal terms as from Mike Macdonald, was like to build a basketball team where you could just kind of have those interchangeable positions, and you could have one guy line up at spot A and be able to play spot D. And that was, I think, like the platonic ideal for Wink Martindale, and Mike Macdonald obviously studied under Wink. I think there's probably similar DNA there, and we've seen, based on how he's asked linebackers to run with guys in coverage, based on how we've seen him have these 330-pound defensive tackles drop into these middle hooks. I don't think it's out of the question that at some point he could ask Marlon to take on a new role and possibly be a guy who lines up in a deep half at a certain point, if that's what it means to make that quarterback hold on to the ball for a split second longer.
Yeah. I mean, right now, the Ravens are only one injury away from being really shorthanded at free safety, because Williams he's not ready to play again. And I don't know how long it's going to be, but it looks to me like it's going to be a while. Stone is obviously in some ways the most important player on the defense because of his center field skills on the back end. Hamilton, we haven't seen him bring that to the game. We've seen him, the threat of him probably be useful to the team in split safety role on the back end. But I think Marlon would bring a different dimension to that. And you've got not only the chance for him to be a center fielder and do those things, but Marlon could also bring you a lot of the punch out skills that you'd really love to have your safety have. Yeah, I mean, that'd be exciting to me.
It was interesting. I forget exactly. This was just like, it was one play, so you don't want to draw too much of a conclusion, but there was a play in the first half I remember watching before I hopped on with you, Ken, where I think it was like a run down, and it was not Kyle Hamilton in the box, but it was Geno Stone, who was lining up closer to the line of scrimmage, which I thought was interesting. Maybe that was just, how the play that Mike Macdonald had called played out. But it was interesting that for at least that one play, they didn't change things around drastically enough, that it was Kyle Hamilton, who obviously a more natural run defender than Geno Stone, being the guy closer to the line of scrimmage as opposed to Geno. But yeah, I mean, obviously they trust Kyle Hamilton enough to be able to line up in a spot like that.
All right, outstanding. I think it's my turn. I'll jump ahead. I want to talk about Travis Jones because I was really high on him during the preseason. I thought he was just playing at a very high level, obviously against some second tier competition, but also when the top offensive linemen are out there, he was generally on the field as well. He was playing the first half of most games, but this game he really had, I think, probably his best game so far. 4 pressures as I scored it, and they weren't cheapies because he got them against Frank Ragnow. Basically, he was the guy he used as a sock puppet pretty much in this game. But I've bowled Frank Ragnow across the cone for a pressure, swam past Frank Ragnow to tackle the running back Reynolds for RM0. So that was a really nice play on 3rd and 1 that brought up 4th and 1, which became the interception. And then on 3rd and 3, Bold Ragnow into Goff for a quarterback hit. I never actually verified the quarterback hit from the All-22, but that's the way it's scored in the game book. And he Bold Ragnow again for a fast pressure into the pocket as Goff threw a 5-yard pass. He had another bull of Glasgow, the left guard. Those are not lightweights in this league. Those are pretty decent offensive linemen, and to get 4 pressures in a game plus another really nice play against the run is good. He had 2 of his 3 tackles were defensive wins. Always like to have that happen. Played 34 snaps. It was a nice game of balanced defensive line play in this game. Some of it because there was some garbage time at the end that they really wanted. They could afford to play people less. But Justin Madubuike in particular, he's got to play less to be very effective, in my opinion, as a pass rusher. He's best when rested. 59% of the snaps last year. I think he'd be much better off playing maybe 47 to 50% of the snaps and maintaining some of his freshness, which means the Ravens need to go to more 1-3 with Pierce and Jones on early downs, or having Jones in there more on the early downs with other heavies.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I was most excited about was to see with Travis Jones in his development, and the thing that was kind of curious about how Connecticut was using him, or perhaps overusing him, was like he was playing just an absurd amount of snaps in college, just like 50 to 60 per game, which is an extremely high volume for a college 300 plus pounder. So I was pretty gung ho on the fact that less will be more with him. And, obviously he had his rookie year ups and downs. I think it was interesting to hear, I believe, Michael Pierce on the Lounge podcast with Ryan Mink and Garrett Downing say that that preseason knee injury that Travis had really kind of threw a wrench into his development that first year. Because do you remember, was it the game against Arizona where he just had that drive where he was basically unblockable? he had a takeover series. And I think that might have also been the game where he got hurt, unfortunately. And, he needed a couple of weeks to get back from it. And he was obviously a serviceable rookie year defensive lineman, which is no small feat in the NFL, especially when you look at just how long it takes for some of these blue chip, high pedigree, former first round pick defensive linemen to blossom. I mean, like Jonathan Allen needed until year 4 until he was, a really, really good player. Justin Madubuike obviously was a terrific sack guy at A&M, but he's only really now kind of fulfilling that promise as a pass rusher. So for him to be where he was last year was, I think, promising. And he came into camp in good shape. And just to kind of restate what you said, I mean, if you can get your hands on the All-22 and you want to look at the quarter 4, 8:43 snap, it's a completion from Goff to Laporta for 5 yards. They move the chains, but what he does to Ragnow is exceptional. I mean, he's lining up as like a one tech. He kind of hits him with a bit of a stutter, to kind of throw off his bounce a little bit, and then he just turns him into a blocking shed. I mean, if it's almost like you would tip your cap to Ragnow that he's actually able to kind of sort of maintain his balance, because the power that he's hit with is so forceful to knock him back like 4 or 5 yards. Really incredible. And you want to see that on a more regular basis, but I think just having those flashes is good enough for me, because it's awesome to see.
What we saw in the preseason was just an unstoppable rip move from him, that anytime these young kids were trying to get their arms on him out there, they're gone immediately as soon as his arm's under. And I really love seeing that. I have not seen that as much during the regular season. I've seen more just plain bull rush from him, but the bull rush has been when it's as effective as it was in this game. There's no problem with that. That's going to serve him well enough to be an NFL player. What was interesting to me was that we really saw the penetrator, because it was a really nice swim move to get by Ragnow on that one run stop. That's what we were promised with Travis Jones rather, and we haven't seen as much to date. Yeah,
let me bring that up right now. So you're talking about the.
Let's see. I'll give you the time reference on it. It was,
mark?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just the combination of quickness and strength to cut across the grain. I wonder if I wonder if that was where Travis Jones was supposed to go, based on how everyone else on that line is kind of slanting to the right, and he's going the other way. But hey, man, it worked for him. And once he gets his hands on these guys who are, like 150 pounds less, they generally do not go very far.
Yeah. All right. Something to be excited about. Who's your next guy?
Oh man, I'm kind of running out of guys. I mean, I guess I'll kind of throw it to Kyle Van Noy, and just kind of cede the stage to you. I know that he was one of your MVPs for this game. Obviously, he had the 2 sacks, and it just keeps on being the right place at the right time. So if you want to take the lead here and just say what impressed you with Kyle.
Sure, just lots to love in terms of Van Noy. He's been a great finisher. He's been a great starter in this thing, but he doesn't have to be the starter and the finisher on this team. I actually thought he would be the guy who would be dropping to coverage a lot, but I don't believe the Ravens have really used him in that thing. I have to go back and look at this to see just how many times has he done it for the whole season. But basically, he's been creating and cleaning up pressure, and he's had some Mr. Almost moments himself where he's missed the initial sack, but gotten in there, got the quarterbacks turned 90 degrees, which is usually enough to finish that play and end up with somebody else making a play for you. You want to get it if you can. Otherwise, so Van Noy's only dropped to cover 5 times with the Ravens, and he's rushed the passer 93.
That's incredible.
So it's not Bowser.
I mean, I thought he would be like a. Yeah. I know. The comp that I made, and I'm happy to admit I was completely wrong on. And maybe we'll see this. His role change as he gets more comfortable with the coverage and stuff. Was like he would just be the poor man's Tyus Bowser, but to have him go 1 coverage snap, 1 coverage snap, 1 coverage snap, 2 coverage snaps is, I would not have bet any amount of money that would have been the case. Yeah. It has not been the case in his career. He's dropped to cover a lot. I want to say he's dropped over 1,000 times over the course of his career. I looked it up when they acquired him, but it's some huge number of times he's dropped. Haven't there been defenses that he's played on where the coaches have been comfortable enough to basically play him as an off-ball linebacker full-time or like part-time?
Yes, that has happened, and I'm not saying that, but New England, which is very similar to the Ravens in terms of how they play him, had him oftentimes lined up at the edge, and he's had as many as 439 coverage snaps. I'm looking at right now, 1,937 coverage snaps, and you're right, it's not the same if he's an off-ball 4-3 or even a weak side linebacker. I don't think he ever played in that weak side role in a standard kind of a 3-4, but I think he's played. I think he has played off ball with 3 linebackers in a 4-3.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if he's going to get better, if he's going to stay as productive as he has been, if he's going to recede a little bit. I mean, you would think that him being in this good shape, despite not having a training camp, despite not having a preseason, would lead you to believe that like the best days are ahead. But obviously he was born in 1990 and so was I. And so I would not feel great about playing football at age 33, but he seems like a very conscientious, smart guy. Obviously was very selective about who he wanted to play for and when he wanted to suit up. So I'm sure that he's got a plan for how he wants to kind of manage his body.
And you're obviously much closer to the team in terms of asking the right questions, having your hand on the pulse. Do you get the sense, Van Noy, my understanding was during the offseason, it was about money that he didn't sign with the Ravens, that he thought he was worth more. And hey, looking at his play, he probably was. But there seems to be each year at edge rusher in particular, a larger number of veterans who can still give you something than at almost any other position. So it's obviously elite edge rusher is highly valued in the draft, tremendously. But the Ravens have done very well, zigging when everybody else is zagging in terms of finding guys late. Just over the last 2 years with JPP and Houston and Van Noy and Clowney, who are cheap as hell.
Yeah. And I was I was ringing like the alarm bells for the Ravens when they didn't sign Justin Houston. And I mean, last time I checked, he had like half a sack. I mean, what is he at, right?
Well, he'd have 5 sacks if he were here.
ESPN, you know. Yeah, exactly. I know it's tough to argue that counterfactual because, as you said, you don't know if that is a product of the Panther system. I mean, Ejiro Evero is a very, very good, very, very smart coach. So you would think that the drop off from a Mike McDonald scheme to Ejiro Evero wouldn't be that steep. But obviously, the Ravens know more than I did because they didn't think that Justin Houston had, or I guess was worth whatever he was asking for. And they paid Clowney and they paid Van Noy, and they are getting, top dollar on those returns.
Yeah. They're both. By the way, we had a mailbag question. Why don't we just hit it right now since it was early? But the question came, and I always like to give credit to the person who actually asked it. So I'll find it as we go here. But the question came from, from Zach Serpa Weinberg, who says, hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's CERPA Weinberg. But he says, on a defense with 5+ MVP-worthy performances each week, who would you say has been the best performer relative to expectations so far this year? He says, I think for my money, it's Stevens, though Clowney is 1B. Who's your guy?
Yeah, it's tough to disagree with that. I guess you could, if I wanted to be
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Guys, I've shared moving. I was using this for all my meals. Now I'm working from home. Guess what? Microwaves in the other room. I'm using this for all my meals. Factor is how I get through my lunch day every day. But they've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I haven't tried the breakfast ones yet, but why not? I think I might add that to my next order. But I love them for lunch. Plus, they've got new autumn fall flavors out right now for a limited time, featuring seasonal veggies like cranberry, pecan chicken, and apple Dijon pork chops. And again, just like everything else, they're ready in just 2 minutes. They'll satisfy your fall cravings during this busy season without the hassle. So go ahead and level up with Gourmet Plus options as well, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccoli, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. Head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use the code RAVENS50 to get 50% off. That's code RAVENS50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meal today.
Contrarian, you could say maybe Patrick Queen, because he was last year a, fringe Pro Bowl type guy. And then, there was that next gen, that NFL.com next gen stats powered article that suggested that he was in fact the NFL's second best linebacker. And I think if you are getting the NFL's second best linebacker, then the leap from, maybe Pro Bowl performer to force multiplier all pro is pretty steep. It takes a lot to go from being like like Zadarius Smith in Baltimore to a TJ Watt in Pittsburgh. You know what I mean? Like that there's quite a gulf. So if you want to go with the assumption that Patrick Queen is playing like an all-pro, which on certain days he definitely feels like he is, then I think you could argue that Patrick Queen has had one heck of an overachieving season. But again, I don't think anyone would have expected Marlon Humphrey to be saying, as he did last week in London or 2 weeks ago, whatever it is at this point, Brandon Stevens is playing like a Pro Bowl corner. Especially because he wasn't even supposed to be the corner.
Yeah. I'm really glad that the Ravens have figured out that that's a spot not only where he can help the team best, but I think also is his best position. It's just more natural in terms of being a physical player there. I'll give you two players who I think are might be more above expectation even than Queen, and part of that's probably unfair in my regard because I had high expectations of Queen, expected that there's no way the Ravens going to be able to sign him and he'll be lost. But the two players that I think you got to look to first is Geno Stone. And if you saw Geno Stone play for Marcus Williams last year, you wonder how they could have ever got by without him because honestly, the step down was just not that much. And Marcus Williams had an insane productivity per snap rate. So that's my one guy, my number one guy, or would be one of the two. The other is Michael Pierce. And he has just had a fantastic year at pushing the pocket, at stopping the run. And one of the precepts of what the Ravens have had to do this year in terms of playing the defense they have and never being forced out of it is they've got to be able to stop the run with the nickel and 6 in the box. Usually that means. And to do that, and it's the hallmark of Ravens history, they've always been able to do it. You got to have great inside linebackers. They got that. You got to have great edge setters. And you got to have great interior defensive linemen, and they got that. So they've really Pierce has been one of the really important players in there, and I think he's still one of the most dangerous if he got hurt in terms of how they would replace him.
Yeah, and I think he is an object lesson in terms of how we, the media, and I guess fans in general, talk about or should talk about quote unquote injury prone players, because he, has missed some time with injuries, but it wasn't soft tissue stuff. It wasn't a shoulder that kept on getting injured over and over again. There was the elbow injury when he was with the Vikings in 2021. I think that there was another minor injury thing that he dealt with that wasn't considered major. Signs with the Ravens, has a great start over those first couple of weeks. Then he tears the biceps, and none of that to me can suggest that this was a guy who, because of the nature of those injuries, was any more likely to get hurt the next season. Those are just I don't want to say freak injuries because you're playing football and he's a big dude playing a very, very physical sport, but it's not like a knee injury that's going to prove degenerative. I mean, it's just like something you get surgery on, and you wait until that bone's healed, and then knock on wood, you are back to full strength the next year. So I do wonder if the Ravens would have their druthers, if they would go back and take away that, if they would have kept the original framework of that 3-year deal so that he would be under contract for next year, because I think that would be tremendous value. Obviously, there are a lot of complicating factors at play there with the Lamar Jackson situation and getting all their ducks in a row in case they needed to match a qualifying offer. But I think if you could have had him, and they still might resign him, but if you could have him for next year at the annual average value of $5.5 million, that would have been tremendous.
What do you think it's going to take to re-sign him now? And I have my own fears about being end of career contracts. I really don't like holding that for a player. It's like holding the queen and old maid. You really don't want to have that. But let's assume that they want to have him. What do you think it would take to sign him?
Boy, I guess now that I think about it, I don't know if it would be all that much more than the prorated version of what they signed him for, because he has had a good pass rushing season, but he still doesn't have a sack, right?
Actually, I don't know that. He's been involved in so much, but I could not tell you, in fact, now if he's got a sack or not.
It just seems like every single year there are those big somewhat over the hill defensive tackles who are good run stuffers, but don't give you a lot on pass rushing downs, who are available in late August, early September, there for the taking, just not wanting to put their bodies through training camp. And, Mike is going to he turns 31 coming up November 6th. So early happy birthday to Mike Pierce. But even though he's been a good run stuffer, I just think the fact that there's such a premium on pass rush protection, and he didn't have a sack last year, doesn't look like he has a sack this year. I don't know how coveted that will make him in the modern NFL. Although, with the rise of two highs and everyone wanting to take away these easy 4 or 5 yard, runs that everyone is trying to spam opposing defenses for, maybe I'm underestimating his value.
Yeah. I $5-6 million, if it were annual value over 3 years and the contract is properly sloped to aggressively make him want to play out that deal as opposed to vacate it, because that's the problem. That's the old maid problem you have with older players, is they want to renegotiate their contract, every year for 2 years kind of thing is the Derek Mason way, I'll call it. I don't want to be caught in that. So if I'd want probably a 3-year deal, 18 million, where 6 million of that is paid in the last season. So it's not one of these things where it's all the money's front loaded and whatnot. There's a relatively modest signing bonus, maybe in the $4 million range, and that's taken out of the first 2 years of salaries. You work out workouts as well. You work out incentives as well that could make it more, and hopefully you could bring him back for 3 more years. And at his age and what he does, there's always injury risk with all players, but I think at defensive tackle, he's actually a little better. He's got a little better chance to be a useful physical specimen at that position than almost anywhere else he might be on the football field from 31 to 34.
And not that it's a silver bullet or anything, but, if you talk to him and how he's reshaped his body, he's like taking great pains to have a nutritionist. He does Pilates, he does yoga. I don't know how much of that is totally preventative in terms of limiting injury risk, but I do think it has some benefit in the long haul. Especially just given what he has to put his body through every Sunday in the fall. So he's in a good place mentally, good place physically. I know he just got married over the summer. Just a very, very happy guy, a guy who loves to be in Baltimore, who, would maybe give you that hometown discount if and when, he returns to the negotiating table with the Ravens. So I'd love to have him around Baltimore. He's a great guy to talk to. And I think he's put himself in a position where he can definitely have a longer career than maybe some folks were expecting when he was going through some tough times injury-wise a couple of years ago.
Yeah, this is you mentioned the things about his body, and this is one of the interesting things, because the Ravens have a way of putting a player's real weight into the roster when they want to teach him a lesson. And the big one was Ben Cleveland last year. They put in at 370, I think 370, 366, whatever it was, but it was way higher than he'd been previously. And they were obviously pissed off about it. So they put his real weight in there. Right now, Michael Pierce is listed at 355 pounds. And I don't know whether that's a preventive measure to try and say, hey, we don't want him to get out of shape again and come to camp like he did, whatever that was, 4 years ago now, probably, and be just a balloon. But there is one of the Ravens coaches, and the source in this is Melissa Kim. I did not hear this myself, but she told me this, and she did it on air, so it's already a matter of public record. So I'm not tattling on her to do this. But she said there's some coach that refers to Brent Urban and Michael Pierce together as a perfect 10. Think about it for a moment. Who might be the 1 and who might be the 0?
Oh, wow. That's great.
So I had a hard time with it originally. It took me about 10 seconds to figure it out. It's just like, it's so mean, but it's so true kind of thing. I don't know who the coach is who did that, by the way.
That's fantastic.
All right. Well, we've gone through a lot of the players. We got through a lot of it in terms of the individual things. How about we talk about, let me do one more question, then we'll talk about defensive MVPs, and we'll call it a night here. So the other question I had, this is a good one. This is from Doug, DW Drummer 99, who says, who's getting paid first? Madubuike, Queen, or Geno Stone. Who can we actually afford now that they're all playing to expectations? To expectations. They're all playing way above expectations.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's tough. I don't think. I guess I'll throw the question to you, Ken. Who do you think would fetch more on the open market at this point, Madubuike or Queen?
Madubuike, because he's an interior defender. The market for that is at a higher level. I think he gets more money. I think Queen will get towards between 10 and 15 million per year, and I think Madubuike might get 16 to 18 million per year as things are going right now.
That's fair. I mean, I think I remember noting with some interest that Patrick Queen, after Logan Wilson agreed to his $37.25 million over 4 years, which works out to $9.3 million, commenting that was a steal for the Bengals. And I was like, I wonder if he's pissed that the floor on the well above average linebacker market was not higher. So I guess that makes sense. I think Patrick Queen, just because of what he offers as a blitzer and as a pass rusher in general, makes his salary probably much more favorable. The floor of his salary probably much more favorable. But you're right that we are now going into a market where these interior defensive linemen are basically being treated like A- edge rushers in terms of the kind of earning potential that they have. So I think you're right that Madubuike would probably get higher than Patrick Queen, unless Patrick Queen just gets like 10 sacks and, like I said, becomes an all-pro. But as far as timing, I mean, I don't foresee a future in which the Ravens strike a deal midseason with either. And because of the situation with Marcus Williams being signed long-term and, Kyle Hamilton being in year 2 of what's probably going to be a 5-year rookie contract, and Geno Stone and his agent probably being smart enough to know that, hey, but your value is going to be much higher on an open market than it is negotiating with Eric DaCosta. I don't know if there's a right answer for timing, because it could just be all within that legal tampering period when everything gets sorted out.
Okay, so the exercise I just went through kind of in my mind was to say, what's the percentage chance of each of them re-signing with the Ravens? And I'll just say it's low in all 3 cases. But I'll give you mine, and then you just did how you see fit. Give me your numbers. But I'll say Patrick Queen, I think, is maybe 10%. And it would really take a confluence of circumstances for it to happen. He'd have to almost get hurt, be looking for a 1-year prove-it deal. I mean, it's almost like that sort of a thing that something would have to happen that would be very bad. It'd be like J.K. Dobbins resigning is because a prove-it deal is the best option, and he's here, and he likes playing with Roquan. He thinks that's how he can maximize his value. But I don't think there's any realistic chance Patrick Queen re-signs if he completes this year as he's playing now at the level he's playing now. I think he's gone for sure. Madubuike,
and just just the fact that, again, not that this should sway the Ravens' decision making with a player as important and as talented and as ascended as Patrick Queen, but like there is that investment of capital in Trenton Simpson, who, for all the flaws that he showed in the preseason, is still a very athletic, very high ceiling player. And I don't think they're gonna. If I'm Eric DaCosta, I don't want to basically throw away a 3rd round pick because, there's a chance that I can have Patrick Queen next to Roquan Smith for the next 4 or 5 years of my GM ship.
Yeah, you'd essentially have to trade Simpson at that point, or you'd probably want to maximize your return on that. I think that there's another lost component of Ravens' value in terms of franchise management that they're not getting right now, and it falls into their 80% of the value at 20% of the price notion. If, let's say, Queen does go out and make $15 million next year, and the Ravens might have to pay him that. Well, think about what $5 million could buy you. You can have 3 players at that spot platooning, or certainly 2 pretty good ones. And I mean by that, a safety who's a big, hard-hitting, decent coverage safety on your passing downs, and another 2-down thumper who's there for other downs. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would certainly be more than a third of the value at a third of the price kind of thing. And so I think the Ravens are missing an opportunity to do that. And I think your third best coverage safety in virtually 100% of NFL instances is better than your second best coverage inside linebacker in terms of pure coverage skills. I think we saw that with Anthony Levine and what he did for the Ravens for all these years, but we've also seen it for 8 other dime backs that the Ravens have had in their history. So it's not like the Ravens are, it's a foreign concept to them. And I think they'll try and tap into that value with platooning at the position because they have to figure out how they can save on this second Lamar contract.
Yeah. And that there's enough, to your point about just dime backs that, even though you will probably lose some of that fun flexibility of having Roquan and Patrick Queen, mug up the A gap on these second and long and third and longs, maybe you can have Jalen Armour-Davis or Pepe Williams develop into a competent enough defensive back where, it seems like the back four for next year should be pretty well set with assuming Marcus Williams is on the team, where it's Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens. That's a pretty nice foundation to build off of. And if you want to take out Patrick Queen and replace him with a Pepe, with a Jalen Armour-Davis, with a, maybe they re-sign Mollett or whatever, just to make those numbers right, then that's a totally palatable solution.
Madubuike, I had a 10% chance to re-sign. Again, I think something has to really go wrong for Madubuike not to hit the open market. And again, I'm sad to say, I think most of the chance of the Ravens re-signing him would be some sort of horrific injury where he has to again go through a prove-it year. And, it is possible to happen. It's happened lots of times in Ravens history. Brent Urban I think went through that process with the Ravens as well as a guy who looked like he was really going to get paid off. And it didn't end up happening. There's been plenty of others too, where it's just been a tragic kind of end to their careers. Matt Skura comes to mind as a guy who really got injured at exactly the wrong time in year 4. But anyway, with Madubuike, I think the chances are very low. If he plays out this season as is, I think he gets a huge contract. I looked at the OTC valuations, by the way. They have Madubuike at about $12.6 million and Queen over $15 million right now for this year's play. So I don't know exactly how they calculate that, but it's an interesting point as to who might make more in the future.
Yeah, I guess that jives more with what I was kind of feeling. That just that they would be closer in valuation. I think it is interesting just to consider Patrick Queen's age. He is still, 24 years old.
Right?
Justin Madubuike is a year older. He's turning 26 in a matter of weeks. So Patrick Queen's still very much an ascendant player, still kind of figuring out the mental side of the game. And if he can be, it's going to be interesting to see which team he ends up with and how they kind of use him, because he has been such a good blitzer that I feel like to throw him in there and expect him to be like a Fred Warner would be a poor decision, at least initially, until he proves that he has that kind of supercomputer mind to handle the Roquan Smith level duties on a play-to-play basis. I think he is just best served right now, at least on this Ravens defense, as like a kind of homing missile. But he's a very, very smart, driven guy, and I'm sure basically anything is possible with him. I mean, it is kind of funny to go back and look at all the hemming and hawing of which Ravens, which linebackers should the Ravens pick from that 2020 draft, because Kenneth Murray has not done much of anything. Who was the other?
Jordan Brooks was right before him.
Yeah, he's been banged up, hasn't really done a whole lot. And here's Patrick Queen, just proving the evaluators right that he was the right pick, and he was the second guy off the board in that case. Yeah,
it's I always have a little bit of hard time justifying the pick when the guy doesn't get the 5th-year option picked up even towards the end of the first round. He is an inside linebacker. It's a big price, and so It's always going to be kind of a question about that. I think the Ravens might want to reverse their call based on what's happened over the last, since the end of his third year in deciding whether or not they'd pick up that fifth year, but maybe not. Maybe, they knew this was coming. And this is, the sad fact of life is teams that draft well have to consistently make heartbreaking choices about their homegrown players. The Ravens are no different. And they, they're in this position. And believe me, it's a lot better than being in the Arizona Cardinals position of not drafting enough good players and having to go pick somebody else's players at a premium price, after that time. So,
yeah. I mean, $12.7 million for 2024. That's what the fifth year option would have cost. And I think probably a bargain at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Geno Stone, I think the chance of him resigning is not quite as low. So I'm going to say, right. And some of it has to do with how he's utilized the rest of the year. People may have seen enough that, hey, he's leading the NFL interceptions. He's a good safety. He's going to make something. But I think if the Ravens are kind of chasing the price on him as they look at him this season, and they might really like to have him because it would allow them to have the two back end safeties and move Hamilton up to nickel and maybe even move somebody into dime next year. Stone could be that guy if you really wanted to waste his talents by playing on the front end, but Hamilton could be that guy too in terms of playing that dime spot. But my point is that I think they would still have usefulness for Stone. The question is, I think they're just chasing the price up. And I think, 3 years, $16 million, maybe it was realistic 3 weeks ago. Now it ain't. They're not going to get him for that kind of a price. I think he could end up making $10 million a year when it comes to signing time.
Yeah, I mean, all it takes is one team, right? Just one owner who sees that. What wasn't the? I think the NFL interceptions leader, whoever it was last year, was like 6 picks for the entire
Cowboys
season. I could be.
Yeah, let me look at it. Go ahead. I'll pick it up while you're making your point. I'm sorry.
Google, I think it was Minka with the 6th and CJ. So Geno Stone, here he is with 4 picks and despite not being a totally full-time player in every single one of those games. So, even if the pick on Sunday was the last of his year, he's probably going to finish in the 80th percentile or above for the entire NFL in picks. And there is such a premium on turnovers and takeaways and just doing your job. And I don't think there's a player who's epitomized that more than Geno this year.
There's only about 30 guys in the entire NFL who had 4 picks last year. So that's, it'd be really special if he ended up finishing there but not as special as it would be if he had 8, done. And
I know
he's been remarkable in terms of his conversion rate and everything, but he's a perfect loose bracket center fielder. He knows when to undercut a route or play the overthrow. I mean, you don't ever want to throw around Ed Reed's name lightly, but he's kind of a lesser Reed in terms of his ability to figure out these things. Trusts his reads tremendously. As a poker player, you really like that when somebody can actually read the quarterback and trust their reads. And I thought it was interesting. You probably saw the thing that was a little video analysis of the interception he had against. From
Ben Solak, right?
Yes, exactly. And how well that was done.
Using quotes that I had got from that post game.
Oh, really? Was that it? So you asked him about how'd you know, and he said, "Well, the route broke to the outside, so I didn't have my responsibilities over here." And he hadn't looked at the quarterback, and he was looking at the quarterback. He didn't look at the receiver at all because he had that part wrong. Yeah, that's great.
Right.
I did not know you were part of that. That's fantastic, man.
Well, I mean, Ben Solak's an encyclopedia for knowledge. He just knows techniques and schemes and zone stuff that it would take me years to understand. So he did a far better job than I did. But I did feel like, what's the tweet that went viral from a couple of years ago? Like, I've been working on this story for 4 years, and he just tweeted it out. So something like that. Obviously, not to that extent, but it was fun to see that used in a much more compelling way than I did. But yeah, I mean, it was split field coverage, and it was Brandon Stevens against Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow looks at Jamar Chase initially and then moves off his read. And that was the cue that Geno needed to go middle of the field and be where he had to be to, I think, pick off that pass to T. Higgins, who, if not for Geno, would have been pretty much wide open because, Roquan said quite confidently after the game that, like, they knew what was coming, but T. Higgins had separated from T. Higgins, or had separated from Roquan on that particular play. So they are lucky that their teamwork was working in concert the way it was, because otherwise that would have been an easy touchdown for Joe Burrow and the Bengals.
Yeah. Very much an individual play within that team scheme that right. Geno made there, because the whole play was designed to draw him in to the chase route. So anyway, beautiful thing. Let's talk MVPs from this game if we can, and I'll let you go. You've been a great sport about this, talking football for a long time, but I usually just go 3, 2, 1. Who's your number 3 defensive MVP in this game?
Oh man, let's see. It's a good question. I guess just because of the sheer efficiency numbers, I can go with like a combination of Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey. Just show some love for the cornerbacks who made life rather difficult for this exceptionally efficient Lions passing attack. I mean, obviously they were not the cornerstones of that effort to limit the damage over the middle of the field, but the Lions wouldn't be so efficient over the middle of the field if they didn't have great options out wide. And I think for Marlon to be as physical as he was, and for Brandon Stevens to be in on as many plays, disrupting stuff, catching up to stuff, even if the overall impact wasn't star level, I just think I want to give those guys a nod for being really, really underrated performers in a comprehensive defensive effort.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Great selections. My number 3 guy is Odafe Oweh, coming back from injury, just a terrific game. I have him scored for 4 pressures, 1 sack, fumble, and really nice to see him get on the board there. And then also the play you mentioned earlier, the big hold, that is a hell of a right tackle, one of the best in the National Football League, and Penei Sewell that he had beaten to the inside. He drew the necktie hold. By the way, a funny story in this game. We had obviously there's a lot of Detroit fans at the game here. There's just a lot of this, baby blue kind of uniforms all over the stands, but we had 4 of them sitting behind us. And the thing that one guy anyway could not stop talking about is how they weren't calling any holding penalties on the Ravens. And of course, they called 3 holding penalties on the Ravens. They didn't call none. They got Ronnie Stanley twice in this game. How many do you want? Do you want 11 in a game? Is 15 enough? But he just couldn't stop guy. And it's like, it's 35-0. Do you really think that's the whole reason for the score? But it was kind of funny to listen to anyway. And it would have been not nearly as funny if the Ravens had been losing. I'll say that.
I know. By the way, just like I was expecting us to touch on this at some point. I don't think we've talked much about Brady, but again, like another. I find myself saying, "What are the odds?" But what are the odds that Broderick Washington would have drawn a holding penalty against Penei Sewell on a pass rush snap? Just such a. I think I have the notes right here, but from left to right. The Ravens lineup along the line of scrimmage on that particular play. What was it? Okay. So this is left to right. It's Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, Kyle Van Noy, and then just like the chef's kiss, Michael Pierce next to Broderick Washington. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 guys that you have basically lining up on Penei Sewell's side of the offensive line there, and it worked because Jared Goff was flushed out of there, and Broderick Washington was there to basically have to set the edge as a pass rusher, I guess if you want to call it that. And when Broderick Washington tried to pull away from Penei Sewell, Sewell grabbed him, and the ref threw the flag, and that was that.
Yep. So he was flushed right, and he went to chase him, and all of a sudden he's inside the shoulder pad of or was it actually in the collar of him? I'm kind of forgetting, but one of those really good plays. It's I love drawn holding flags are a big indicator for me for any sort of pass rusher, and if you really shouldn't be thought of as anything really less than a sack. Even on first down, a 10-yard hold is approximately equivalent in value to a 4-yard loss. that brings up. So first and 20 and second and 14 are approximately equivalent in terms of your chance to convert them. So it's a huge play when you get an offensive hold. Plus, there's another hidden value there is that the defense has the optionality on a holding call of denying the play or not. So if the actual result of the play was a sack or was some other event that they like more because of the down and distance, they get to keep that instead. That's why post-snap penalties so much more significant than pre-snap flags.
Yep, works for me.
All right, you're number 2 guy, I think. So I had away at number 3. Yeah.
Number 2, yeah. I mean, I think we're probably in lockstep with what you had on your film study recap. Justin Madubuike. I mean, looking at the next gen stats, 4 pressures. He was double teamed on 42% of his pass rush snaps.
Wow.
As a run defender, he was. Let's see how many did he have any run stuffs? He did not have any run stuffs, but still, he had 2 run tackles. The Lions just did not run the ball as much as we expected because they weren't in a position to. So yeah, it was just a very nice, rise to the moment kind of game against a very, very good interior Lions offensive line.
1 sack, another sack he should have had on a ball that was grounded by Goff. He got the quarterback hit on the play. If that quarterback hit had gotten turned into a roughing the passer to offset the grounding, that would have probably been a moment that would have made my head explode, particularly after the Michael Pierce roughing the passer last week, which I thought was ridiculous. The notion that Goff would be able to ground the ball and then not take a hit in that situation would have been really silly. But frankly, Madubuike just denied a sack. It was a -12 on the play. It's as good as a sack. It should count in that category, honestly, but obviously it doesn't. So he is my number 2 guy as well. 5 pressures as I scored it, including that play.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of bring back the point of just like as a finisher right now, just looking at some PFF stats. So he has 21 pressures according to PFF this year, 6 sacks. So you're talking about basically converting 1 of every 3 pressures for a sack. Compare that to Aaron Donald, 35 pressures, just 3 sacks so far. And then Chris Jones, 28 pressures, 7 sacks.
Very good.
So he is well ahead of the curve in terms of making the most of his opportunities. You do wonder if there is some negative regression coming there for him, like I mentioned earlier. But until the evidence mounts otherwise, the Ravens should just enjoy the ride, and I'm sure Justin is going to do that as happily as he can be.
That's a very, very valid point, and that's the right way, I think, to look at that regression, because people from PFF always tell me those pressures are going to be much more stable than the sacks. So it's kind of like how many at bats are you getting is your pressure in a sense in terms of how you finish them up. I do think this Ravens defense is providing him with lots of opportunities for cleanup that some of these other players might not be getting on other teams. But that's a measure of value and opportunity too, that probably doesn't work in Madubuike's favor in terms of how much of that he's personally generating.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could say he is benefiting in a lot of the same ways that Justin Houston benefited last year, been the on the receiving end of a lot of these great stunts and twists that have been set up for him by guys like Patrick Queen, from calls like Mike, on calls from Mike McDonald. But again, it doesn't work unless you're executing your end of the bargain too. And he's definitely doing that. All
right. And your number 1 guy?
I think it's your number 1 guy, right? Kyle Van Noy.
There you go. All right. Another big game. And we've already kind of hit on a lot of what he did in this game. Is there anything else you want to point out that maybe we missed earlier?
No, I think, let's see. I think NGS had him with 5 pressures. Let me see. It was, 5 pressures.
Mm-hmm.
So, 18.5 pressure rate, which was, I believe, the best on the team. Again, I think he's done that at least 2 or 3 times so far. Obviously not double teamed all that high because he's on the edge there, but time to pressure, 3.42 seconds, pretty good. Yeah, I mean, just being the right guy at the right time. It's been very, very fun to see the kind of range of pass rush moves that he had. I mean, until last week, that nice little spin move that he had against Tennessee, I didn't know that he had that in that bag, but he definitely does, and it's he looks good. He looks good doing it for a 33-year-old.
Yeah, it's bodacious. It is really fast. Get to the body and spin right off it, and there's just nothing the tackle can do. One of the things that impressed me about Van Noy in this particular game was that Clowney did not have a great pressure game. I scored Clowney for 2 pressures. And he played a fair number of snaps. And look, they were passing the ball every down for a lot of the game with 58 out of 72 pass plays out of 58 out of 72. So it wasn't a great game for Jadeveon Clowney, and yet the Ravens still put it together in terms of another fine pass rush effort. And Van Noy, Matabike, and Owe, who are the top 3 guys on my list, really were the 3 who put it together. I mean, they got an Arthur Mollett sack, and they had other guys delivering pressure, but those 3 really put together a great game.
Yeah, and it's a good sign that they can do what they did against this talented Lions front, because now they are going against the Cardinals, who have some nice pieces. Paris Johnson, I guess, has done pretty well as a rookie, but you look at what PFF had them ranked going into week 7, just the 20th best offensive line. So this is the kind of line that, if current form holds, the odds are definitely in the Ravens' favor. They should definitely have the means and the personnel to get after. I guess it's probably going to be Josh Dobbs at this point, but I mean, I was just texting with a friend earlier. Nothing would surprise me with this Ravens team, Ken. I don't know how secure you feel about the Ravens coming out of Arizona with a win, but I am the thoroughness of the Ravens victory has inspired inverse feelings of confidence, just because of how wacky and weird this Ravens season has been.
Yeah, that's true. I'm always kind of a worrywart. I'm always kind of fearful of what could go wrong, kind of like a helicopter pilot instead of a fixed wing guy, where you just worry about how this thing is going to drop out of the sky. But it is a reasonable concern, I think, to first of all, to the travel involved and everything, to see what might happen in Arizona. But anyway, it is what it is, I guess. Hopefully a bad team and a mismatch, and they are 8.5 point favorites. Let's hope this works out, because they don't have a lot of easy games left on the schedule.
No, I think if you're drawing up a worst case, like a how does this go wrong type thing, it's like it basically comes down to Hollywood Brown revenge game. Because other than that, I don't really see a lot of recourse for the Cardinals. I mean, obviously there's the possibility that the Ravens just get into the red zone like 4 or 5 times, and again, just have to come away with field goals because of whatever weirdness afflicts them, and whatever good juju they had with them in Baltimore against Detroit does not hop on that plane and make the 5-hour trip to Arizona. But again, they have a better offense, they have a better defense, they should have a relatively equal special teams. I think the Ravens are down to 19 in DVOA in special teams, which is pretty frightening prospect considering our top 3 expectations for them. But again, this is a game where they're 8 or 9 point favorites, and I think Vegas is not lying when they make it that decisive.
Yeah, and I'm also not buying that special teams relativity. I think there's regression to number 1 that will occur for the Ravens special teams, because they are so well coached and so talented in terms of that. And frankly, kick coverage is almost no part of the game anymore. I mean, you can take it totally out of the game if you just kick the ball in the end zone. So anyway, Jonas, always a pleasure to talk football with you. I know we said this on the first episode, but it's natural. We go down so many rabbit holes when we talk about this, but it's a natural consequence of really just enjoying talking football with you. Tell folks where they can reach you online, where they can read your work from Baltimore Banner, and whatever else we may have going on.
Yeah, if you like listening to the sound of my voice, we have a Banner Ravens podcast hosted with Paul Mancano. Just a much more abbreviated version of Ravens Talk. I think our editors are capping it at a half hour for now. We're hoping to get a little bit more expansive in the months and possibly years to come. But listen to that on Spotify. Listen to that on Apple Podcasts, Banner Ravens Podcast. And then if you just want to read our coverage, we have a big feature on Roquan Smith coming from our other beat reporter, Gianna Hahn, on Wednesday. Nicely timed to the impending anniversary of Roquan's trade, just kind of talking about his emergence as a leader, as a communicator. He's in a lot of ways become the kind of unofficial spokesman of this Ravens team. He talks the talk, and he's definitely walking the walk. And I'm excited to see how that story turns out, and excited to see people's reaction to it.
All right. All right, fantastic. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I'm always looking for new content. And this is the way this works. It's a guest-driven show, and I meet new people by you contacting me. And with your idea for a story, I'll work it out with you. Again, try and make it kind of small so we can get it done in about 20 or 30 minutes. That's the goal of this shorter content, to introduce the show to other people. Jonas, thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure, Ken. Thank you for having me.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.